Really nice to be here. Thanks for coming. It's the end of the day, so it's nearly the end of the week, so I know what it's like. So you're just thinking, I want to go, but kind of just a bit more energy to do these things. So I'm glad you have. It's really great to be here. I'd like to thank the Margate School for firstly letting me put the show on, which is fantastic. It's been brilliant throughout in trying to get this done. For obvious reasons, it's been rescheduled a few times, just like everything else in the world. So yes, but we've managed to finally do it and put the show on. So I wanted to thank everybody here for all their help and support, and also thank my own institution, and that's Leeds Beckett University, because they've really supported me. I'm head of art and design up at Leeds Beckett, so a bit far from here and nowhere near the beach. I oversee courses in my subject area department are obviously graphic design, illustration, fine art, fashion marketing and product design. So quite an array of courses, and they're at undergraduate and postgraduate level. So yeah, busy time, just like the here for us. So it's getting started for the term, but it's great to be back on campus working with colleagues and students, importantly. So it's fantastic. So it's great to see people here doing the same. So I'm here today to obviously talk about sort of background of what's gone into the show, but talk about lettering and typography at the seaside. It's well, it says on the poster, I think. So I think I better start talking about that. I think. So to give some background, as I said, I'm I don't know what sundry I'm in. I'm on the way. Head of art design. I'm also a PhD candidate, and my PhD title is Lettering and Typography at the British Seaside, a study of resource identity, development and experience. So doing that at the moment. So why am I doing this? Give a bit of background. The background is that although I live in Yorkshire, and I live just outside Ilkley, so those that know the sort of gateway to the Dales, again, nowhere near the seaside, quite high up, and prone to some inclement weather when the winter gets going, but beautiful all the same. It's a gorgeous place to live. So I live there, but originally I'm from the English Riviera, so I'm from Torquay, Devon. So I went up there for university, and barring a 4-year hiatus in Hampshire, we've lived there ever since. So love it up there, but miss the seaside as well, so hence we're always taking trips to far-flung places like Margate, which is fantastic. So from here, and I think really, in growing up by the sea in Torquay, I would see lots of this sort of material around. So a lot of promotional sort of identity, promotion, obviously for the tourist industry, to entice people to come down to Torquay, Paynton and Brixham and see that around. And I suppose moving away as the years have gone on. I was born 1972, so that's coincided with obviously the holiday boom of people getting on planes and going away. So a place like Torquay was still booming in the 70s, but you started seeing it sort of drop off a bit into the 80s and then into the 90s. It's still really busy, but nowhere near as it was, the popularity of what it once was in the 1970s. So I saw that sort of firsthand. And I think what's always fascinated me about these towns is the design, architectural design, the heritage, also being always interested in graphic design from a very early age and going on to be a graphic designer. I was always conscious of type and design in these places as well. And I just felt that this sort of area is a bit untapped really, and a bit under-documented, and if I'm honest, a bit underappreciated really. I think there's lots of facets of the seaside that maybe underappreciated, and sometimes they're a little bit neglected as well. I mean, it's getting better now. There's a lot more funding and there's a lot more care, it seems, about our seaside resorts, which is a really good sign. It still needs to be more done, but it's really encouraging to see that there's a lot more regeneration schemes that are happening. But yeah, I think we all know that there can be a lot more done. and there's a lot of beauty that's not seen or not protected, I think, within these resorts. So not going to talk too much about my graphic design practice background, but even within this, I did a lot of design for tourism. So I'd work for Yorkshire Tourist Board, I do a lot for the City of York, Scarborough, so a lot of design and promotion, a lot of identity work, a lot of print work, a lot of advertising. So again, it was something that I was really conscious of how these sort of mechanisms work, how these strategies work. So I thought, well, for a PhD, I'm really interested in lettering, typography, graphic design. Obviously, words and pictures is fundamental source. What can I have a look at that's really going to intrigue me? Because the advice in always undertaking a PhD is that you want something that's really going to challenge you, but it's going to hold your interest. Because ultimately, the goal of a PhD, I've been told by my institution, is that, and they're absolutely right with this, is that what is going to be your contribution to knowledge? So that's the unenviable task that we have to do. And so I'm in year 5, so I've got another 2 years of completing it, and then I have to do what they call defend my PhD in a viva, and then substantiate my contribution to knowledge. So not quite there yet. So I'm not building myself up here so that you think, right, well, what is it then? We're going to leave with it. Not quite, but I'm on my way, I think. So the feedback I'm getting anyway. So so we're looking at the graphic language that can intentionally or inadvertently inform the personality and identity of an environment. So looking at how the language, the graphic language of the place can really inform the environment effectively. Okay? So if we look, so looking right at source, this is an old picture of Margate, so even back in, I think this was 1887. So we're looking at this, you can see the amount of typography, the amount of things in with windows, the busy high street, it's literally this street, so it looks a lot different. But if we look at a lot of signs, signage, and the seaside vernacular, we start to see a lot of signs and typefaces that seem very, very familiar to us. You know, so we're sort of, we can walk down any promenade and we would see a lot of these typefaces. And over the last 5 years, and obviously prior to that, it's been where I'm from and where we go a lot, I've been observing these things and looking to see whether there are any traits, you know, is there any patterns with this? Where is it coming from? Where are the influences? And what I'm trying to do is get a bit of an understanding with that, because I think if I can understand that, then we might be able to inform some future strategies of how we can balance the protection of our heritage, but whilst looking to be a contemporary resort. So it's a tricky balance, but I think it is achievable. So when we're looking at associations, you know, we're looking at my hometown of Torquay. When I say I'm from Torquay, what do you think people say? I'm from Torquay. So what does anybody think of Big Hand? What Torquay, if you don't think. Bolton Towers, yes, top answer. If we were doing family fortunes, that would be the top answer. Absolutely. Second, anybody got these things? So it's Bolton Towers, which is really, I think, unfair on Agatha Christie. She was born. Imagine that, you were sort of, you've been put in the shadows by a comedy that ran for 12 episodes. Anyway, so poor Agatha's always around about second or third, but it's always.
It's about the there's like a big wheel there, isn't there?
It's a big wheel, yeah, absolutely. On the seafront, yeah. So so that's been there for a while now as well.
There's a huge roundabout with amazing floor displays as you come into it.
That's right, that's always there. Welcome. Yeah, that's it.
I thought it's beautiful.
It is stunning. They take a lot of care with that. It's really good. So thank you for that. It's really good and it was accepting. So the reason wanted to talk about that is that he's obviously with the seaside. There's lots of association before we've even started to think about, okay, so how can we develop what the brand is, what the place is about, you know. So Skegness is forever associated with this, you know, its celebration still to this day now, which is fantastic, because it is a fantastic illustration, brilliant poster, but they just can't shift it, you know, so they play on it. There's a statue of him, the Jolly Fisherman. There's a statue of him in Skegness, and why not? So it's about, they've sort of taken that on board, and effectively, so that's come from something that's a piece of graphic design. You know, so they're something that's really associated with the town has come from something that's effectively a piece of graphic design, poster design. You know, commissioned in parts, so the lettering was done separately, and John Hassel did the painting. Okay, so in those days. So similarly with Brighton, you know, lots of different associations with what it's famous for. You look at the pavilion, you look at some of the architecture, you look about that it's quite a liberal resort. You know, it's you know, London by sea. Some say, you know, so it's about looking at association as well as looking at what the actual town's heritage is about, which is really important. In the environment, obviously, when we're looking at the seaside, it's key that obviously what's around us that actually decorates the seaside, presents the seaside. But really, when we're looking at it, lettering is omnipresent in our daily lives and takes a great variety of forms. And this is it. And when we're looking at this, these are either forms of private and voluntary or public and involuntary. Okay, so that the private and voluntary is something that we're going to read. The public and sort of involuntary is the stuff that we see when we're walking down the street. So it's something that's sort of, you know, shining at us, illuminated. So that, you know, the voluntary, the private is we decide to pick that up. So that could be reading matter, books, journals, websites, discrete information notices. So that's a different form of us interpreting information. So the writer, and well worth a look at her work on both lettering and typography in the environment specifically, is a writer called Nicolette Gray. I'm sure many of you have seen her work. So Nicolette is a scholar that really researched the origins of typography, particularly in Britain, and explored and researched a lot of the early letter forms and typefaces that we use quite freely today, which I'm going to come on to in a moment. She's written several books. The key one that I refer to quite a lot, for obvious reasons, is a book called Lettering in the Environment. And they're very tough to get hold of. There's some digital versions as well. You might there's PDFs sort of floating about from the British Library. You can get them, but they're a bit pricey, and some of them are, you know. So they are accessible. I really recommend having a look at her work. But her work is referenced in a lot of other typographers' research as well. So Phil Baines, for example. Again, look at the work of Phil Baines. There's an excellent book by Phil Baines and Andrew Haslam called Type and Typography, which is a really great grounding into type and typography. Yeah, really well worth a look. Really well worth a look if you're interested in typography. So the idea of, you know, as I said, you know, this is private and voluntary. We'll pick up this guide. We want to find out about the town. And then this is involuntary. So if we imagine we're walking down here, and you know we cannot avoid that sign that says tea only 10p inside. You know, we just can't. We're walking down and we've got lights and illuminations coming at us. So there's different forms of language with that. So it's important to look at. So this is all the same place, by the way. So it's Blackpool and then Blackpool back in the 50s. So you know, whether it's in public or private form, it is important to consider that letters are rarely used in isolation or independent of meaning, particularly when they're in the environment. So it's this idea that, you know, we don't tend to look at them in isolation when they're in the environment. It's different to when we're looking at something in our hand. So they actually inform the environment that they're in. Okay? The idea as well that lettering and typography can be prominent, but also, you know, indecipherable. It can also be a blur. You know, so the idea that we see something like this huge sign on the side of a building telling us that it's going to be a fun palace, going to be lots of amusements in there, and then we walk past another one and we can, you know, it's indecipherable. We just can't see it. So it's looking at all of these forms and thinking, well, what is their role? Is it the fact that there should just be a blur, or should we look more into it? And is there a distinct role for this form of graphic communication at the coast? Does it have to be in the same form that it's always been, or are there boundaries that can be blurred with this? Are there, you know, challenges to the norm, and have we seen phases of this happen over time? And we have. But we still see, you know, we're still seeing a lot of referential work, if you like. Okay. I think at this juncture, it's useful also to, and I'm going to do it in a sentence, and there's canons written about this, so I'm not going to do this justice, but I'm going to do at least one definition of what I think is the difference between lettering and typography. Okay. So lettering is bespoke, it is idiosyncratic. Typography is, by contrast, is the means of implementing repeatable mechanical digital components. Okay, so the idea that more often than not, lettering is something that's created specifically, maybe for one purpose, maybe for a particular client. They might be basing their craft on a particular digital or mechanical typeface on an existing type form, but the way that it's actually painted or cut into stone is, by its very nature, handmade, handcrafted. Okay. You can also have letter forms that are then digitized and then cut out of vinyl and then applied to a sign. So you can do it that way. It doesn't always need to be painted or carved. I'm going to go back to the dark ages or anything like that. Although these skills, it is wonderful to still see these being practiced. For those of you, I am going to throw in, I hope you don't mind, like references as long as along the way. So if you are interested in looking at different things.
Yes. Is there a copy of your presentation available?
Yes, I'm going to put a link to, I'll put a link, I don't want to talk, no, absolutely. You know, I can put some references as well. The last time I did this, I made a big list for references as well. There is a sign writer, and he also owns his own steam fair, and it's called Joby Carter, so that's Joby, and you might have heard of him. Fabulous work, fantastic. Look at his website. He does evening classes in typography and lettering. I did one in March, just couldn't resist it. It was like, you know, 5 nights from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock at night. It was absolutely brilliant. It's brilliant. So, and didn't cost the earth. So I'm even advertising for him, I should be on commission. So that's one of his there. So, and he does that like in 3 nights. You know, he'll show you how to do it, draws it, and so I'm good with digital type, but you know. So looking at lettering, very much bespoke. We're looking at typography, it's about movable elements. So it's movable units. They used to be in metal or wood. Now it's a typeface that we use as a series of fonts. You know, the idea that you know, a font is part of a family, part of a typeface. So that's the difference. This is repeatable. So I can have a typeface and use this typeface. All of you could have Windsor, and we might use it at different scales and sizes, but we'll be using the same typeface. Okay? All right? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Does that make any distinction between the two? Because I think sometimes we can use these terms without maybe, you know, it's a bit like font and typeface, isn't it? You know, it gets used the same way, but the same thing, but they are different. You know? Okay? So So it's important, I think, when we're looking at some of the origins of what we see along the promenade, what we see at the fairground. It's important, I think, if we look to a pivotal period in this country and in the industrial age worldwide, to look at some of the origins of typography, lettering around the industrial age. So early 1800s was just huge for many reasons. Obviously, beyond typography, the industrial age had quite an impact on our lives, but it also was in design as well and language. So when we're looking at this, we're looking at type and vernacular sources from the industrial age, and really we're looking at classified typefaces such as Egyptians, fat faces, antiques, and in particular Tuscan letter forms. Okay, so those are classified classifications of typefaces. Okay, so anybody heard those before? No? So to put that into context, I suppose, so I've talked about Egyptians, fat faces, antiques, and then Tuscans. After that, we then start to look at modern typefaces such as modern serifs or modern Romans, and then we move into sans serifs. Okay, and then we go over to modern sans serifs, and then right through the 1900s, to be using typefaces such as Helvetica, and the European influence of using such typefaces gets developed. Okay, but back at this era, we were just coming out of the sort of late 1700s, whereby it would be a lot of typefaces like this. So it would be Baskerville, Bembo, Caslon, so lots of typography that we would see in the early forms of newspapers, publishing. So that to the left would be the typeface that would be predominantly used for information that we would see. It would be used on posters, playbills that we would see as well. But the fact there was felt that there was a need for a bigger impact, for much more of an impact to get people's attention, okay, for various reasons, to promote things, to highlight law and order around towns and cities, to warn people, to inform people, but also persuade people to buy things, so for advertising. So in its purest form, we go from that to that for promotional purposes, and that's what a lot of it was being driven by as well. So a lot of typefaces were starting to be developed to do that job. So we go from these lovely Roman typefaces to something like that. Okay, so when we're looking at something like that, we've got some key typefaces here, and I'll tell you. So I didn't want to be too sort of didactic and make it into either some sort of typography tutorial where I'm giving you a worksheet, but it's probably useful at this point to talk about maybe some of the differences between the typefaces. Okay, so talking about Egyptians. Now this is named after a named Egyptian at that stage, so they're called Egyptian slab serifs. Okay, can anybody? I am going to ask questions. Best to get a bit of audience participation, isn't it? Which type, you might all know, I'm sure you do. Which typeface do you think is the slab serif? Lost? Reward. Yeah. Why do people think reward?
There are typefaces called slab, and that's it.
There's many. There's a category. Yeah, there is many. You're right. You're right. So why do we think that reward is the slab?
Because it looks pretty slabby.
You're right. It's absolutely right. Yeah, it's big, bold. It's not going to fall over. It was cut into stone. It was for that very reason. They wanted the early type founders. So I'm going to talk about them in a moment. They really wanted something that was going to be substantial enough to be cut into stone, into the architecture, as well as being printed on posters. The reason it's called Egyptian is that all things in that period were inspired by the Egyptians, art was brought back at that time. So anything that was found to be contemporary, even though it was developed and designed initially in London, Fleet Street, had the word Egyptian put in front of it for it to be much more enticing European-wide and worldwide. That is simply the reason for that, which is a bit disappointing. We spent ages trying to look for what I think is there any origins in Egypt for this? No, there's not at all. And then the fat face.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Why is there such a big gap between W and A, and they've done it again on Galilee?
Because he wants to trigger us.
Yeah, I mean it's the early forms. It's the early forms of setting, and I would think it's quite a cumbersome set, to be honest with you. It's if I'm being unfair to the compositor. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sorry.
Also, if you look at the edge of the W and the edge of the A, right, if that A was over, it would actually be under the other letter.
Yeah. But absolutely, so they, you know, if we were doing it now in InDesign, we'd just start a kern. We would just start, you know, you know, when I'm teaching typography classes, I'm always saying to students, you literally need to get into that word and look at those characters either side to get them over. And that's what a compositor would do, but they would add lead or wooden pieces. So that's where we get the word leading from, because when we're looking at it that way, they were chunks of lead pieces that would do that. Just in case you, no problem at all. No problem.
Is there a reason why they didn't actually just cut them at angle rather than?
I think it's a good point.
Did they just not care?
Yeah, no, they did. No, it's about balance, because if you did that, it would also alter and the research has been that it would alter the way that we read characters, because your eye wants to trust the patterns of characters as it reads from left to right. So if you start, and that's why it's always the thing of, I've always been taught not to use too many typefaces within a page, because your eye just hasn't got a clue where it's supposed to go next. Even don't use too many weights. I'm always of the idea that you can do anything with 2 typefaces max, and one of those you want to use really sparingly. One might be a headline typeface, use the other one with bold and you can make it.
You couldn't cut it at an angle, because when you put it in the frame and tighten the frame up, everything has to butt against itself. Otherwise the pressure, if you've got something at an angle, you're creating space and it will.
And they haven't tried that, because you're absolutely right, because they even tried the foot of the case that they used to do it. It's not even a piece at the bottom or the top, you know, so if you're cutting the angle so to do it, but it starts to become a bit of a jigsaw, and you're absolutely, it just falls all over.
That's why there's the big gap between the W and the A, because it's on a block.
It's really difficult.
They couldn't balance it, slips.
The only way that they could have done it is actually alter the space between the A and the R.
Or put it through the press twice, which is expensive.
Yes. So the other typeface that we're looking at, so obviously we've got our friendly Egyptian sans serif, not from Egypt, and then we've got fat faces. So very obviously because of the weight of these senders, the weight of this stroke, and the very, very delicate serif. So it's a serif typeface, but it's incredibly delicate. So the idea with this is they've seen that the early type founders thought that this typeface and this categorization, this category of type, was type in its extreme. So they were pushing it to the limits of where it ceases to be a letter, because the serifs were so delicate to do that. So it almost becomes, you know, they're pushing it so far that it could almost become a sans serif with some of them, because they're so hairline that we just see we see them come through. So yeah, as I said, foundries and letterers utilise new display types to advertise events through posters and bills. You might be familiar with John Parry's watercolour of this period. So this is a London street scene in 1835, which I think is fantastic. I can see that now. But so, you know, posters, playbills everywhere. But this sort of gave us a sense of just the impact of this new technology, really, this newfound industry that was at their disposal to suddenly be able to immerse the streets with type of all different forms, and we can see lots of those. You know, see lots of the Romans, the Tuscans aren't quite there yet. So one of the key, I'm not going to sort of go through all of the history, you were pleased to say, but you won't be able before about 10 o'clock. But I'm going to talk about a few key figures. One of the most important is a type founder and a typographer called Vincent Figgins. Figgins was instrumental in developing lots of these classifications, be it Egyptians, fat faces, Tuscans, and later looking at both serif and sans serifs and bold modern typefaces. And again, the development for this really is that he was looking to develop a range of modern styles and a numerous jobbing typefaces, as they were called. So they were developed as to do jobs, to promote and advertise things for people and be really accessible and be much more economical to use. He was also looking to design typography that felt three-dimensional, that felt as if it was going to be seen from a distance. Okay? So again, we can see these typefaces in any of our type and font folders that we have on our computers, be it PC or Mac. Lots of them will be familiar, whether you're using something similar to Times New Roman, or you're using Clarendon, or you're using Baskerville or Bembo, something like that. Then they will be inspired by the creation of lots of these typefaces here. And this is one of his type specimens as well. So you can see there's a lot of fat faces, but also these fat faces then start to be not decorated, but they start to be embellished and start to be developed into shaded typefaces, and then become open typefaces, which go back to the history of a lot of open Roman typefaces. But they're very much to be designed to be used large, and you can see they're all uppercase. So these are not for reading text. You wouldn't use that shaded type to read text. It would be really difficult to read. But it's to be seen on a poster. Okay? So again, name of the typeface, and we can see the fat face. Okay. So again, it's, you know, exaggerated strokes, delicate serifs was a fundamental tool in promoting theatres, pier shows, circuses of the period. Another key figure in this was Thorogood and also Caslon. So Caslon, who designed the Roman typeface, is involved in this new revolution at the time in typography as well, and printing. Okay. In a survey of public lettering, the writer Jock Kinnear, who does we know who Jock Kinnear is? So for those who don't, he worked with Margate Calvert to design our motorway typography signs system. So they designed the typeface that's used still to this day up and down the M1 or around our towns and cities. So he knows, I think, it's about putting lettering into the environment and typefaces in the environment. So he describes Egyptian slab faces as the letter forms of emphasis, displaying strength and clarity when applied to buildings of juxtaposing styles. Okay? And we can see one right here, just down the road. So again, you know, this idea that something's cut into that, it's got that weight, we can see that slab serif at the foot of that typeface there, that really gives us that weight against the architecture. You know, it's not gone too delicate or too ornate because we just wouldn't see it. So it's type that's designed specifically for the building, and we can see the period of time there, you know, so it's around this time of this innovation. Okay? We start to see some of the typefaces then applied, so to circus posters, to theatre, to posters of performance in the streets, so we can see that how this type then starts to dominate, and it's used really different to even posters 10 years before, even less time before, where it's predominantly those Roman typefaces that we used. Right? These then get picked up. The key thing to this is that these typefaces then start to be adopted and co-opted by a lot of other European typographers and designers and compositors, and also, key to this, a lot of American compositors and typographers start to pick up on this and start to think, we can make some of ours, but we're going to make them bigger, and we're going to make them out of wooden typefaces. Shock horror, right? So we're going to make them bigger, and we're going to use them for larger forms of advertising, and then we're going to develop some derivatives. And they did masses of them, and they took them and started to take our shaded slab serifs and flat faces, and then start to embellish them with different patterns, with different ornated, decorative styles, and then we started to acquire them back. But effectively, they really took on these big, massive display typefaces and developed them into wooden typefaces for larger poster use. So we can see here how they start to do that, and we start to see sort of the early forms of Tuscan typefaces, and the Tuscan typeface is absolutely fundamental to the to the seaside. And I think in my research so far, I would say that it's the dominant classification that we see along the seaside. We see a lot of derivatives, we see a lot of typefaces that fall into that category. That category is quite wide, as you can imagine. There's lots of different variations of that. So there's sort of the classic ornate Tuscan, or there's a chromatic version that the Americans designed. So the chromatic version has like these things in it, where it makes it look as if it's like metallic or it's three-dimensional. So it looks like those signs that we see along the seafront before they're a sign. So they're called chromatic typefaces, Tuscan chromatics. So they're very much adopted. They were, you know, the Americans ran with it, developed end of the pier show, posters, signage. If you look at Coney Island, absolutely everywhere with those things. But also we can see it within their cities as well. So Las Vegas, they also started to co-opt a lot of type within Vegas. Is again based on this sort of vernacular and sort of borrowed by the seaside, actually, when you look at a lot of the type forms. And the fact that when you're looking at the architecture of Las Vegas, if you look at the writing of Robert Venturi and Denise Brown, if you look at their writing, they actually write about, they're architects, and they actually write about the value of graphic design and lettering in the environment. They say that in Vegas, the lettering and the signs themselves are as important as the buildings that have got the attractions in. Because we see the sign first, and the sign is part of the experience there. And it's all the same when we're at the seaside, you know. So Blackpool often advocates itself as the Vegas of the North, and models itself on the blurred landscape of all the lights and the illuminations, and the sign first, and then you get the experience. So it's really synonymous with that sort of idea. I'll move on, because otherwise we won't get through. So so we can see this. So we can see here, this one here, this chromatic. So originally developed by Figgins, and then taken forward by many French designers as well. But this then gets developed into this chromatic typeface that we see, and it's what's called zebra wood. So we see that a lot along the seafront, as we do with this one. This is called rosewood, which we see in a lot of arcades as well. So we see it in its purest form. We also see them on their versions of their theatre posters and circuses, and how they start to do. So if we start seeing, we've seen it in print form, then we start to see it along the seafronts as well. And this is where I start to make the connection and to look at some of the origins of it, and actually start to see that it's got more of a heritage than we maybe ever thought. That they're not just randomly picked by some sign writer, but there is some value in what people are considering when they're looking at that. So we've got to look at those other Tuscan typefaces. We see that in its reality illuminated along the seafront of Yarmouth. Okay? So the 19th century poster houses of America were hugely, and still are hugely influential on the British seaside today in the form of the anti-Clarendon classification. So when I mention these terms for typography, these are not necessarily typefaces, but in Clarendon's case, that is a typeface, but it's also a classification. Okay, so in the same way that sans serif is a classification, there are numerous typefaces that would be categorised as a Clarendon within that category. It is a wide open debate of how and why things are classified. I've also been researching someone that did their PhD solely on how and why typefaces are classified. It is a huge study, and it's stunning. She's called Catherine Dixon, and she teaches at Central St Martin's and works with Professor Phil Baines, who is actually my supervisor as well, which is brilliant. But Catherine's work is to look at why and how these typefaces are classified and the rationale about what they're doing. So it's not yet exact science, but they have to be sort of categorised somewhere for them to make sense. As I said, the Tuscan, in its many guises, remains prominent and the most frequently used letter form of the British seaside. The origins of the Tuscan typeface can be dated back to the 4th century inscriptions by the Roman calligrapher Pyrrhus Donnus Vulcarius. Okay? So early inscriptions, and what we want to look at with that is you can start to see these little sort of decorative serifs there that show the earlier signs on there. Okay? So these early signs of decoration, and these would be cut into stone as forms of, that period signage, but also, obviously, we see a lot of this early typography on gravestones as well, so the opposite to what we think we see, for something for leisure, pleasure and entertainment. But effectively, that's the originator of that typeface and that typeface. Okay, so, again, something that we see synonymous with the typeface. Effectively, the curved fork-like bifurcated and sometimes trifurcated serifs, so that's sort of the shape that they do at the bottom, add an expressive, ornate tone to the letter forms, and again, the expert in this field, Nicolette Gray, actually describes them having an undulated rhythm and a new sort of pattern of light and shade. And the letter forms really invoke this idea of sort of, expressive, carnivalesque to it. That's why they were designed, and that's why we see them being adopted for the seaside, effectively. Okay, so again, it's just coming back to say that it's not sort of random process in a sense. Okay, so this was Figgins. So we remember our friend Vincent Figgins, right, some time ago. So he who looked at the slab serifs, fat faces, and other jobbing typefaces, wasn't going to miss the boat on being involved in the design of the Tuscan, and produced the first Tuscan in 1817. Further to that, there was further English Tuscan typefaces were produced by Thorogood again and Castellon in 1830. From that point, lots of independent foundries subsequently produced lots of novelty derivatives that we found in this country, and then were exported again European-wide and also to the States, where they made bigger and more ornate versions, as we can see to the right. This is Thorogood's version as well, and Caslon at the bottom. So Caslon, who obviously developed many other Roman typefaces that were familiar as well. So we can see the importance of that. And we can see those in situ with this. But the Tuscan itself is really associated with playful flamboyance, synonymous with entertainment, and also this idea of escapism of the seaside. And if we look further at the shape, so if we're looking at shape of typography, shapes of letters, shapes of language, and you start to sort of pull them apart as components and look at what actually they're made up of. So if we, you can see our antique, you can see which really aligns to a slab, and the clarendon there that I was just talking about. So it's different to a serif because it sort of goes to a slab but sort of stops. So it's not quite as solid in that base. But we see the Tuscan. We also see the Tuscan sort of shape and ornate sort of decoration in not only in typography at the seaside, but things like architecture. So the buildings themselves, they're looking at even railings or along the seafront itself, along the side of piers. We'll see those sort of shapes. They've almost got sort of jester carnival sort of shapes to the tops of their letters. So if we see those, we can see that it's useful sometimes to just pick apart sort of the anatomy of a typeface to see what it's made up of. I mean, I do that. Clearly I need to get out more to do it, what I mean? But you need to do it. But it's in all seriousness, we can really see that those patterns are synonymous with what we see in shape and form and pattern around the seaside, which is key. Alongside that, we also see lots of Roman typefaces. We also see lots of sans serif typefaces, lots of typefaces that are synonymous with recent vintage design trends that we're seeing in lots of towns and cities, not exclusive to the seaside by any stretch, but we are seeing a lot in the seaside. A key typeface that is fundamental to getting us to the seaside is both Johnson's typeface, particularly to London, obviously, for the London Underground, but also Gill. So Eric Gill's Gill Sans, I'm sure we've all heard and used the typeface Gill Sans. Now these are the sort of typefaces that would be on posters that would persuade us to go to the seaside. And now we're seeing sort of a resurgence with that, on the back of a lot of referential design, reflective design. So we're all how can I phrase this well? Not give you the answer, because I've got it on the next slide. What's the most seen vintage postage do we think over recent years? Anybody think? What's that, sorry?
Keep calm.
Absolutely. Keep calm and carry on. So again, this is we see a lot of the letter. And the reason I'm talking about this is because this links to sort of a sense of nostalgia that is also synonymous with our experience of the seaside. Same typeface as this you see here. So the writer Owen Hatterley, he analyses this nationalistic appeal of design, and he calls it, describes it, unrelated to a lived experience. Okay? So when assessing the popularity of keep calm and carry on posters, well spotted. And what he describes as austerity nostalgia. Okay? The poster design using the sans serif typeface, Gill Sans, designed in 1928, with design and use of typography evocative of British traditions, get words out, imbued with nostalgia and association we experience at the seaside. Okay? So it's not surprising that we see a lot of this stuff in the souvenir shops. as well, because it's sort of building on that same, with those similar traits of getting us to the seaside. So some of those things, we don't experience all of the things that we go to the seaside to experience. Some of us don't like fish and chips, some of us don't like piers, don't like going on the fair, but we associate and expect those experiences when we go to the seaside. Okay? So it's almost building in this sort of recognition of what this nostalgia is linked to. This probably sounds like a lot of promotions, it really isn't. I've just had the fantastic opportunity to write a paper with Dr. David Jarrett. And David is an expert in tourism, and his PhD was on seasideness. So not design, so he comes from a tourism angle, but his PhD was on describing seasideness and what it, so it was a term he came up with, and specifically to Morecambe, right? So that's his study, and he was looking to identify what does it mean? Why do we go to the seaside? What are the associations? What draws us there? Apart from, you know, us hoping for a warm day, you know, and getting on the beach, and it being warm all day, and getting there in time and parking our car and all that. But what are the other sort of key aspects of that? Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but he describes, you know, there's two columns either side. So this is seasideness in the middle. So I'll read a few of these. So seasideness is experiencing the senses intensely, the sublime and the beautiful, wellness, spirituality, nostalgia and reminiscence, revisiting seaside traditions. That's what it describes, right? And either side you've got place attributes, so things like sea views, sea air, smells and noises, vastness, distinct sort of leisure zones, and then the tourist, so the desire for the removal from the everyday. So it's about escapism, okay? So the model reflects the meeting of place and the visitor. Okay, so this idea that we play a part on the seaside being identified as the place itself. Okay, we don't go, it doesn't happen. Okay, right? So, and the key factor in us going, or us having that experience, is design. Okay, this whole aspect of this not being dressed in the way it is, then that's not going to be the experience that we expect or want, or maybe not want. Some of us don't, you know, don't like it, don't have to like it. There really is a lot of these typefaces that I think, oh my God, you know, but I understand their relevance, you know. So we know that the seaside can unfortunately be still associated with stereotypical assumptions. I'm going to move on a bit because I've still got things to remember, something I've got to go. So, which is unfortunate. So again, graphic design has a big part in this. So, you know, the idea of promoting a place like Blackpool, fully out typography, which is great. It's a great advertisement. And also looking to re-identify themselves. You know, so there's different ways of doing it. So this is a fantastic new identity by True North for Blackpool's new museum, and it's called Showtown. So really contemporary feel. So when we're looking at different aspects, we can observe the use of typography at seaside through different forms, and I've categorised these into sort of different sections. They can be informative, so these could be like wayfinding, signage and advertising. They can be persuasive, so this is the same place, different eras. Could be public art, so this is the Cumberley carpet, or typographic in Blackpool. Or it could be incidental, inadvertent forms of graphic design that are found. You know, so street art, could be graffiti, could be torn posters, things like that. They all still contribute to our experience of the seaside. Okay? If you walk around Margate, we'll see, you know, ghost signs. Those signs that have been left up for lots of time, or even recent. All layered, you know, where someone's revealed something. You know, again, that makes up part of the city's landscape. Or accidental viewpoints, you know, so where something's obscured and it creates new words or new meanings. You know, couldn't resist that one, I'm afraid. So, or new means, you know, couldn't resist that one. So it all contributes, and it's the idea of the graphic design, all of these aspects have more of a role to play than we maybe think or maybe want. Okay. So I'm going to talk about some of the content in this. First, to talk about some recent projects, as well as doing some projects and being involved here, which has been fantastic. Also exhibited in Morecambe with a project that was responding to what Morecambe was about, so part of the regeneration programme, which was great. So I was focusing on Morecambe was really famous for a lot of beauty contests. So it was sort of a mix of how sort of wrong that was, and also there's beauty in the landscape, but also there's a lot of decay as well. So I was sort of exploring it through that. I've also been lucky enough to, in the summer, be involved in an awareness campaign of coastal erosion, and this is at the East Coast, so I'm in Bridlington. So trying to increase awareness by using Klaus-Oldenburg scale ice lorry sticks and using the joke as a vehicle to get across a message. So we photograph these on the beach. So they're not as big as that, but they look huge next to other people, but they're not as big as that. But they are. So which brings me on to this, which is fantastic. So to be able to talk about. So effectively, what I've just been talking about now, we've seen in all of these pictures. So fat faces, Egyptians, Tuscans, serifs, they're all in this array of images that are frequently seen around the country. Again, we can see the origins right here, down the road. They're all around here. That was in Margate, east of Margate. That's Brighton. Nicolette Gray again says that this is one of the earliest forms of a Tuscan that is seen in architecture in this country, and that's the Brighton Pavilion. So we can see the origins and the importance to that to the coast. Again, right here in Margate, and then in Brighton. To the point. So, what was I having a look? So my approach to exploring this was to take, I'm sure, a poem you've never heard of in Margate, obviously Eliot's Wasteland, and too good not to resist really, but to have a look, sort of like a fragmented version of that, because that's the way I felt that the seaside is. It's in fragmented form that we see lots of signs and lots of language within the seaside. So to look at that, and the idea is really to have a series of type specimens that would hopefully give people a bit more of a referential overview of where some of these typefaces and classifications have come from, and take us on a narrative through that. So we see some of the ones I've talked about today, some of the very ornate ones, these open face typefaces. This is in use in one of the cafes just along the seafront on the way to Westbrook, I think it is. Early Roman typefaces, then slab serif, just around the corner. We've got some of the shaded typefaces, Egyptian slabs, working right through. So it's sort of in chronological order, without being too restrictive to tell the story, but we can see the real impact. So this is based on one of the original shaded faces that I've been talking about, but this is actually a very new typeface that's been designed recently by a type foundry called Commercial Classics, and they are a type foundry that are looking to re-energise some of those typefaces from that period, and for us to use again today, which is fantastic. And this is a stunning typeface. It's called Caslon Sands Shaded No. 1, and was designed in 2019. Although it looks about 200 years old. So again, we can see the relationship to the specs that we saw earlier, that one in particular. And then the Tuscan, absolutely key to our experience of the seaside and its decorative, flamboyant nature. It then inspired a lot of derivatives being illuminated. You can see a lot of derivatives of a lot of the Clarendon weight typefaces with lots of shading and three-dimensional feel to it. Again, it's synonymous and borrowed again by the designers at the Festival of Britain. So again, looking at the recreational value of some of the Victorian typefaces at the time. We were much derided in Europe for doing that, but the value was seen to be there. So again, see the Tuscans, and we can see the relationship between those. You can see the Festival of Britain, that as well. So we see these typefaces from those American specs that I showed you earlier on. So again, this is the typeface that we'll see in a lot of arcades, a lot of along the seafront. So this is called zebra wood, and we see it in its bullet form or in its chromatic form, and often there'll be alongside lots of slab typefaces or sans serif ones as well. So trying to also, with the colour palette, also tried to sort of evoke some of Turner's palette as well. So the colours can, so in looking at this work and trying to look at that, almost trying to evoke the landscape. I'll be honest, when I was designing this, the biggest problem I had, which was a bit concerning when I started, is that the design actually didn't facilitate using a lot of photographs of seaside typography. So, because it just kept clashing. So I had to use landscape or very, very much, atmospheric. So I tried to put the signage in that window then, and it just all didn't work, because it's all about the type itself. I'd be very conscious. 10 minutes over already. So we see the detail there. So Tuscan chromatic, as I've said, and then one of the key ones there. But these are American typefaces that I showed you earlier on. And then we come to right at the end, this one, which is bringing us up to that point that I was talking about, a lot of gill sands that we see back in the landscape, which I think is really nice. We also see those bold typefaces, the one I showed you at Brighton. So that's Cooper Black. These are some of the American Tuscans. So this is the Hamilton boundary. So again, much more flamboyant when it's come back, if you like. Playbill, this is typeface, and Windsor. So that type specimen that I showed you earlier on. When you see them like this, it can look a little different. So Windsor doesn't look as glamorous when it's not lit up, but it's effectively a typeface that dominates the seaside around the country. So where can you see more about this? I've also written articles that give a lot more background about this, and that's for I magazine. So that's the International Review of Graphic Design. So I'm really pleased to say I've written a series of articles about that, gives you much more background, so you can refer to some of the rationale about some of the work that's gone into this exhibition. Fully exhausted that image. Got on with his work. Yeah, and that title. So John and I kept saying to me, you're really good at writing puns, just keep going. Are we there yet? Can resist it, really. That's what we say when we're on the seaside. And also, I had the opportunity to review a fantastic exhibition. Really recommend the book. Again, I don't know whether anybody saw this, it's tremendous. I'm hoping it's going to carry on touring, because it went to Newcastle after this, so I don't know whether it's going to go again.
So that's really useful. So, lots of the images I've shown you, obviously from the regeneration of lots of places. Key to that is obviously on our doorstep. It's seen many iterations, and you will all know more about this than me in this respect. But a lot of the design decisions I know from speaking to people involved who looked at this, as I've been doing with lots of projects, the Blackpool as well, is that it's getting that balance between something being referential but also feeling contemporary. So it's taking our heritage and moving forward with it, not sort of being stuck in the past. But type dominates these landscapes, and if we're looking at regeneration schemes for Brighton,
type, pattern, shape are dominating how we're going to look to redevelop our promenades. This is one in Weston, again looking at quite a poetic way of looking to describe place. What do they want it to be? And again, graphic design and lettering, typography play a significant role in designing the contemporary seaside resort. So that's it from me. Thank you for your time. I apologise I've gone over. Thank you very much. Any questions or anything like that, I'm happy to answer. Or if you're that late, you can contact the school obviously, and I can come back to you via email.
Hello. Yeah, hello. I was intrigued by some of the typefaces that you used that would have been used. I don't know if they were used at the time, just in the cowboy western movement.
Yes.
Supposedly so wanted.
Absolutely. I was going to include all of those, but I was concerned I was going too long.
Well, I wonder what really came first, because you mentioned the American influence, but then of course there was the fun fair, and I remember the Goose Fair from a million years ago, which again was very fun fair. That's miles away from the beach.
Yes.
And yet, again, the type and around the whole fun fair was all typographical. It really smacks of a lot of what was in the seaside type. It's just all mixed up in there, and so I'm wondering about the chronology.
Yeah, from what I'm finding at the moment, because I suppose it's a good thing and a bad thing. There's very little written about the history of design at the seaside, except for if it's architecture, and even that it's a lot of it's about Victorian architecture or Art Deco. There's a lot for that, but very little on lettering and typography and graphic design. You sort of find a lot to do with the posters. So early posters, but that's late 1800s really. So from my research into sort of the origins of which came first, from what I've seen so far is that a lot of our original typefaces, those slabs, the flat faces, they really inspired the American typographers to then sort of co-opt those, and they just made them much more accentuated basically and bolder. And they really developed the wooden type form, so massive letters cut from wood to print. They're far cheaper than doing that out of metal. So casting metal type was quite expensive. So to do wooden types, they could develop that. And then started to use those for, as you say, we had playbills that were to do with law and order in our streets around London, for example. And also at theatres, they started using them with big letter forms for wanted posters, and at the same time services and theatrical events and public notices. Lots of public notices were sort of in the same vernacular as you can go to circus tonight. So yeah, really powerful to do it. Sorry, I'll answer the question.
Yeah, sorry, I just got a general type question to ask you. And the question I ask myself quite a lot sometimes in my work is, as we're moving towards the digital age, and as things became more digital in general over the last 30, 40 years, we're seeing it move more towards, it's becoming very accessible for people to design a typeface overnight, and arguably it's moving less away from the craft unless you're a big foundry or something like that. On the whole, do you see that as a good thing or a bad thing?
I do think it's, I know what you mean, I've got my concerns about it because, where you start to, and I know a lot of type foundries have concerns about it for obvious reasons, because people are taking their typefaces and putting them in glyphs and doing a little tweak and calling it some name that's, completely different and passing it over as their new typeface and selling it to a mass-produced font.
Yeah. Will I open up the font?
The font? Yeah.
And I look at this there's thousands.
It's thousands, yeah.
And I just ask myself, is this a good thing?
I think it's good if it gets people into designing type. I just hope that they go through eventually the proper route of understanding how typography works, and then look to develop something that someone would want to pay for, and
I suppose you can always tell when it's just been sort of a homemade one. You can tell by the reproduction of it when you're printing it. You know, and even on screen, you can just see the postgrade. You know, it's just people just don't want to use it. You know, so it is sort of, it goes with a lot. It goes alongside a lot of the social media sort of methods of designing, as well as in a sense that where's the protection for the originator? Yeah, it is a debate. I do change my mind. I'll be honest with you. If it encourages more type design, I like that, but it's really challenging. You know, for those. I'm going to talk about type before we go. So it's challenging. Yeah. So
just to add something to Charmaine's comment, you know, technology, everyone's always scared of it, and for some years now, you've been able to. You can make a typeface in your own bedroom, you can make a film in your own bedroom, you can make a whole album in your own bedroom.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's going to be good.
Okay.
It just means that the market is massive.
Yeah.
And over years, you'll find 10,000 people try it. In 10 years, there'll be 4 or 5 people who've actually gone all the way through and mastered the craft.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's, you know, if they really want to, if they're really serious about that craft, because it still is a craft, you know, we're talking about that typeface that I showed you all a minute ago from 2019. Really recommend that if you're interested in typography, to have a look at this type foundry called Commercial Classics, or Commercial Type. So Commercial Type is their main type foundry, and Paul Barnes, who works with Christian Swart, they designed the typeface for The Guardian. So the bespoke typeface for The Guardian, and then they designed for lots of other clients as well. But the offshoot of that is looking at these historical typefaces, which could be their own sort of, I suppose, equivalent of them designing something in their bedroom. Well, they're not at work sort of thing, but they've obviously done it professionally and wanting people to understand the reuse of them and why you'd want to use them. And also, interestingly, with their foundries, is they provide guides on how they think you should use the typeface. So they really they look at stuff, you know, and it's just, you know. So Paul, but they're not like stuffy about it. They won't, you know, get really upset if someone uses it. And they really like it. So Paul on Twitter some months ago spotted that a nightclub in the Isle of Man had used one of his versions of, I think it's one of the shaded serif typefaces that they redesigned. And he was, proper nightclub design. And he went, just wonderful that a typeface that originates from 200 years ago is now used, for a late night party night in the Isle of Man. So who cares?
It's sampling.
Exactly. It's communication. And he's like, that's, if it's done right, and someone, and do you know what, he really complimented the guy on, do you know what the thing he complimented him on? He paid for it. And he bought the typeface. He said, isn't it great? Someone's normally trying to rip me off, and get a bootleg version online, So it's really important, and I suppose with my study that's ongoing, my next phase is really looking at how we could potentially have a referential toolkit. So either councils, because David, who I've written this paper with, he said to me, why don't you do a toolkit for designers so they know which typefaces that they can use for it? I went, oh no, David, designers would hate me for that. They would hate me. He said, well, why? So, no designer wants me to tell them what typeface to use. They'll tell me to run a line. No, they want to make their own decisions. What designers would really like, like an archive, something they can find out about things, maybe the origination, where it's done, how it has been applied, what's the impact, then they can make their own decisions, So there's lots of those sort of toolkits and archives around. So my research is working towards something like that, really. So that, you're sort of giving something to someone, but you're not telling them how to do it. Because I'm a graphic designer, and you wouldn't just be awkward about it, but you want to find out why you want to do it yourself. Any other questions before I let you go?
Sort of leading on from that last question you just had,
why do you think that these letter forms have persisted so much by the seaside? Because you said most graphic designers like to take things and do a remix, do their own thing. Yeah. But these letters have lasted a long, long time.
Yeah, yeah.
The sort of the Gills and the Johnson inspired stands that you now see more and more. You know, is that part of the current Western trend of simplification anyway that we see through corporations?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Do you think that will persist for 20 years, or what will happen?
I think you're right with that comment. With the there is a simplification with that. I think when you look at the Tuscans as a category as well, and as I said, from what I observe, not exclusively, but in a lot of resorts, it's used everywhere in some form. I think there's a couple of factors with it, really. I think when you're looking at something like the slab serif, so if you look at that one there, this again is used, throughout many resorts. Cooper Black, the reason that that's used is it's bold, it's just sturdy. You're going to get a lot of ink on that typeface. You're going to get your money's worth with your impact with that, and that's what the environment's shouting for, really. I think because the typefaces still have impact from when they've been designed. You still see a lot of slab serifs used as well. You still see, I was in Brighton on Sunday, and the classification I probably saw the most, this one, which is classed as a Roman, still, slabs, Tuscans, they're just all everywhere. And I think because they're reliably impactful. I think the other bit, which obviously working with David's really given me an insight, is the nostalgia. I think it really relies on our nostalgic view and our trust of it, or our expectancy. So we might not like an attraction that we might see in a certain typeface, but there'll be millions of people that really will, and will expect that attraction to be dressed in that way. So if it was, I don't know, an arcade was suddenly designed in Helvetica Ultra Light, or Helvetica Light, a bit like M&S, the M&S identity, but still suddenly when, it's, delicately done, with, their similar sort of campaigns that they do. That would suddenly, that typeface would really, really change our perception of that arcade.
It would be a very boring arcade.
Yeah, I mean, everything inside it might be the same, but that typeface would change what we would maybe think is inside.
Would it though? Wouldn't people just ignore it because they wouldn't see arcade? They wouldn't read into it. That sentiment that you're expressing, and they take it by.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that it would potentially do, the thing that we could say it wouldn't do, it wouldn't have the impact because it just hasn't got the weight. But I agree with what you said, it's going to say the same thing. If it says, fun arcade, Margate, or Margate Amusements, I think they've just done a new sign on the front on one of them. I think it's called Margate Arcade or Margate Amusements, I think. But again, that typeface has got real weight to it because they want people to see from the other end of the road, don't they? So, what it says, I do think it's and particularly with the Gill stuff, there's a lot of nostalgia committed to that. In what that evokes, and even when we're seeing with some of the colour schemes, the green, the colour palette of this very British green that is painted in, and we're seeing a lot of reds as well that are painted. So that even the colour palette and how it's produced is referential. It's trying to tap in stuff. There's a shop a bit like this one in Brighton called England at Home, and that's painted in Gill. So Gill sounds just so it's so it's just playing to that heritage in a sense, particularly to international tourists as well. That really want to see something very British or very English when they come to the resort.
And it plays to social demographics as well, I think.
Yes.
Because if you look at the top one, it's the that kind of springs middle class kind of.
Absolutely.
The affluent down to this is working class.
bit common.
Yeah. Yeah. I purposely juxtaposed those just to see because it's a fast food immediacy. The other one you might want to go in and browse. It's sort of saying that, isn't it? Yeah. It looks much more reliable. No offence to that's a lovely shop, by the way. I've been in it lots of times. Yeah. Hello.
Hi. Just to subvert what you said about using the element instead of what would be typically an attractive seaside typeface. So this isn't any arcade, this is Margate. As a,
Brilliant. Brilliant, like it, yeah.
That doesn't work, does it?
No. Yeah. Does it?
No,
I sort of want to see it though. I feel like I want to design it. Yeah. Oh, great. That's a great stop on.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Great. That's a really good point. Yeah. But when you sound it, doesn't sound right, does it? It's about the language as well, isn't it? That's as important.
Maybe it is.
Yeah. The language is as important. As is, what you've just been saying about, these two here. I've been doing my next sort of thing that I'm doing next is swapping some of these things over. So I've been, just having a look, my degree dissertation did that. So I swapped tabloid and broadsheet typography to just see how I would read the news differently, And you do get into sort of blurred lines, so swapping the tabloid with the Times, you sort of get into middle ground of, not the political stuff, but like Daily Mail or the Expression. But it's the key to it that really made the change in how we read was the language. It was the language. It was the puns or non-puns from the Times. And how we dealt with it. So that's the biggest factor, as well as the typeface we use in the colour palette. Because again, the colour palette's key there, isn't it? British racing green, probably classed as that. So, and that's that cafe one, just along Margate. So it's one of those open typefaces with a serif damage. But so it is surprising how dominating they are. Going back to your question about why they're still here, but it's because of their impact, their lasting impact, which I think is fascinating stuff. Going back to yours, how many typefaces do design as we've been in here now, and we're still using a lot of the archetypal typefaces that we've used the last 20 years. Any other questions before we close? Well, thank you all for coming and listening to me ramble on about typography for an hour and 15 minutes. So it's been great to see you all. Thanks again for your time. Thank you.